Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of High Strangeness. Today, I have my new buddy on, Heather Moser, and let me just tell you some tidbits about Heather, aka a bio. Tidbits, it was not the right word to use, but we're going to roll with it. Heather Moser is a producer and researcher for the documentary film company Small Town Monsters. You've heard me reference them a bunch of times. We love them over here. She is also an author and adjunct professor. You can read some of her work on the first, third, fifth, and seventh volume of The Feminine Macabre. And you can also catch her on the podcast The Lore You Know and Monsteropolis. Heather, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time. It's one of those things where, I've been watching you on the Small Town Monsters documentaries for years now, and it's one of those things where, like, geez, I feel like I know her, even though I don't. But it's like, but I on this show, I have referenced y'all's documentaries so many times because I feel like all you guys are doing is exactly for me. It's like what I want to be watching.
Fantastic.
And there's a lot of great stuff out there, but like it really is, there's something about the tone and the choices you all make on how to cover these subjects that we love to talk about on this show. I just think you guys do such a beautiful job. So but we'll get into the nitty-gritty of this. But okay. Heather, it seems like to me, just putting two and two together, that you've been researching folklore, pagan history, and good old-fashioned high strangeness for a while now. How did you get into these wonderful topics?
Well, I mean, it started a lot like I think most people around my age, where you grew up with unsolved mysteries, and it was difficult to not get sucked into the world that Robert Stack is narrating in front of you, for better or worse, because it also gave me some of my first nightmares and some of my first anxieties. And but unsolved mysteries is what sparked my interest from the beginning. And then growing up, hearing stories from my mom about the house she grew up in that was supposedly haunted. So that kind of ghost story happening. And where I grew up is a little town called Carrollton, which is just down the road from Minerva. So if anybody's familiar with the Minerva monster, which is where I currently live in Minerva, so I didn't go far. But anyway, growing up, hearing stories about people seeing Bigfoot. There was someone that I went to school with. It was probably elementary age. It had to have been elementary age. That his family had an encounter, and that was just over the hill from where I lived growing up. And it was just kind of a discussion of, yeah, Bigfoot's out there, but it wasn't a question, I suppose, is how I should phrase it. It wasn't a question of whether it was out there. It's just, yeah, he's out there. He may not be very frequent, but he's there. So I just kept with that in the back of my mind, and always been into the weird stuff because of unsolved mysteries, starting that peak early on, and then kept that with me into college, where I went into classical studies, so Greek and Roman history, and anything weird that we would talk about in ancient history. I always was like, I was sucked in by the myths. And when we got to study Latin epigraphy, there was an opportunity to study what are called cursed tablets, or defictiones is the Latin term for it. And I would always beg my professor to save that for Halloween time, so we could talk about cursed tablets during Halloween time. And yeah, I don't know, always liked the weird stuff. And then that kept up, and then Small Town Monsters popped up in 2015, and that got my attention because it was a local town that they were covering, so everyone was talking about it. And followed Seth's work for a little while, and kept up with my own, and then eventually things worked out where he was getting ready to do the Bell Witch.
Ooh, great one too.
Yeah. And I had already been doing research into the Bell Witch legend because I was studying cursed objects at the time. So I reached out to Seth and said, "Hey, if you want a researcher, I'm down to research." I missed doing it because once I graduated college, I wasn't, unless I set on my own journey, there wasn't any tasks set before me to research. So Seth's like, "Yeah, actually, we're at that point where we could use a researcher." So that's how I got started. And the first thing he put me on actually was Momo. That was my first job for STM, was working on research for Momo. And then it's taken off from there. And now I'm officially the chief creative officer of Small Town Monsters. So it's progressed.
Yeah, well, you've become like it's so weird because I guess I come from the narrative story world, but I was to use the word cast member, but like you're a series regular, you're a staple of like, especially the the ones directed by Seth. But it's interesting. Like, did you like when you offered to start researching? Did you think you become a part of the documentaries like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. I actually, the first time that Seth brought that up, it was for Mothman Legacy, which I had been doing research for anyway. And he's like, "Hey, we could use somebody who could speak about the Appalachian tie-in to Mothman, and I'd like you to be the one to do that." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." I remember I said yes, but then I got off the phone and had a panic attack immediately. Like, I can't, like, I've got to really know my stuff. Like, what if he asks me a question that I don't know the answer to? And what if I suck at this? And then what am I going to look like on camera? And like all of these things. And I then just studied as much as I could for the next several weeks until he had me come out for my interview. And then it was really very painless because at that time it was during the COVID shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just Seth and I. And he said, "You're going to sit in that chair over there. I'm going to have the camera right here. You're going to look at me and I'm going to ask you questions. We're just going to talk." And that is what it's like to be interviewed by us still to this day. But he's like, "It's going to be a lot more conversational than you expect." And that's exactly how it was. And I was put at ease pretty quickly, and there was joking and stuff. So that helped loosen me up. And
yeah,
now there's like, at any moment, I feel like there could be a camera out, depending, like if Seth's around, he could be filming something. So it's just like,
right.
Whatever. I mean, if he comes out to the property or whatever, because we did the Bigfoot project, we filmed here on this property. And so anytime he comes out here, there's a chance that he may film something. I don't know. I just have to be ready that he's broken me, I guess, in a way, when it comes to, so to speak, when it comes to camera stuff.
Well, it's interesting you said like because I do feel like what I mean, there's so many things I love about Small Town Monsters films, but like there is like the interviews are like they're not like overly formal, which I feel like when they are formal, it doesn't feel right to me. Like for some reason, when covering this material, I mean, for others, I'm sure it does. When maybe a UFO documentary, when they're interviewing military or government people. But I guess that's not what I'm particularly interested in. But like, I love the it goes along with kind of like the small town monster theme. It's like, hey, we're easy breezy. We're just having fun here. We might be talking about folklore, or we might be talking about something that really exists. But it almost doesn't matter at a certain point because, as I'm sure you're aware of, folklore has a big impact on culture in small towns and society at large. So,
exactly.
Well, you're from the Pennsylvania, Ohio-ish area. I was telling you before we jumped on that my wife's from the same area, and so I've become keenly aware of all the folklore and history of UFOs, cryptids, and folk magic and all that stuff. But there is kind of a history, like Pennsylvania and that in Ohio, in that region. It's unique where they do. It seems to me, like from my research, that they do have this tradition of folk magic and I guess you would say witchcraft. I'm not sure if that's how it would be termed.
Yeah, I mean, I think today to term it witchcraft is a lot more acceptable than back in the day. Back in the day, they would have never said that it was witchcraft, because there is such a strong Christian undertone to it. So that would have been looked down upon. But yeah, there's definitely like folk magic that was used in this area. We have a strong German influence, especially in Pennsylvania, and bringing in like Dutch type folk magic there. And then in this area of Ohio into West Virginia and this edge of PA that I'm on, which is the eastern side of Ohio, you've got a lot of the Scots-Irish type of influence here. But yeah, I think there's still stuff that's pretty thickly ingrained that people don't necessarily see it as folk magic anymore. It just is what was passed down. Planting at certain times of year, or just even talking to my mom and asking her, like, what folk tales do you know, Mom? And she's like, I don't know any folk tales. But then as you speak to her and you hear things, I'm like, well, what about, have you ever heard the term about, or the saying to get a sty off your eye, that you rub a gold ring on it? And she's like, well, no, but if you didn't pee in the middle of the road, you wouldn't have got a sty in your eye. And I'm like, that's a folk tale. That's what I'm saying. But
bingo, Ma.
yeah, right. I'm like, that's exactly what I was asking for. But it's just little sayings and stuff like, yeah, oh, Grandma used to say that, or Grandpa used to say that, and just different things that still get passed down. And I find myself today with certain things that now that I'm a mom, that I might say to my kids at first, or my gut reaction will be to say something, and then I stop myself because I'm like, well, hold on, that was just an old wives' tale, so to speak, and I probably shouldn't be so critical right now. But
right, they're just children,
right? Exactly.
But eventually,
that's right.
They'll get the lecture eventually. Well, I was doing some, just very like surface research kind of on folk practices, and I came across a couple that I'm curious about. And I'm not sure if how much you know about this stuff, but like I came across that the Pennsylvania Dutch practiced, I don't know if they still do, but at one time, a form, I guess, of witchcraft, and if I'm getting the labels wrong, please forgive me, but it's called hex, and I'm going to mispronounce this, hexarray? Have you heard of that?
That sounds familiar. I don't know much about it.
Right. What about brew sherry? Brew sherry?
No, you're fine. Yeah. I don't really know a ton about that either. Right. I just know a lot of the folk tales that are in the area, and I haven't dove too much into the different types of practices specifically. But I know the Pennsylvania Dutch, you see remnants of the witchcraft and stuff. Even if you just drive by the barns, you see I forget what they're called, but they're symbols on the sides of the barns they look almost like quilt pieces, but they're not. And that's just an old reminder in a way, I think, of what used to be, but just memories of the olden ways of being. But I can't remember. There's a name for them, and it slipped through my head now. But you see them every once in a while. I've even seen them down south in some places, and I've wondered what the tie-in, like how closely related the people, at least who built the barn, were to Pennsylvania Dutch, because you see it all over PA.
Interesting. Oh my gosh! Now I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for that. See, I love that kind of stuff. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier, and I kind of want to circle back to it a little bit. You mentioned that in the Minerva area, that when this was going on, or maybe even nowadays, that people are just like, oh yeah, there's a Bigfoot. It's rare, but it's around. I find that really interesting. So it's like these towns, even though they don't have the body, they don't have the proof. They're really just like a feeling in Minerva, or like in other small towns you visited, where there's this acceptance of the local high strangeness widely. Like have you come across that?
Yeah, definitely, in certain places, because there's just been enough stuff that's happened that it's just kind of like it's just another day, or that's not that new or exciting for us because we've experienced it so much. I mean, and that's not to say that you can't use the blanket acceptance either, because
Right.
of course there are people that are going to be naysayers, and until they experience it, they're not going to believe it, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then there are people that are more open to it, and then there are the people that experience stuff on a fairly regular basis, and there's no question of them whether this stuff exists or not. It exists. What
Yeah.
it is, they may not know,
Right.
but weird stuff is happening. So when it comes to like people in the area knowing the Minerva monster story, of course it's real to the Catons. The Catons experienced it.
Yeah.
And friends and family of the Catons would know, yeah, that happened. Like they experienced something
Mm-hmm.
for sure. But there are other people in the area. If you just go to like the BFRO website or anything, you'll see that there are other, it's not like it was an isolated case.
Right.
There are, and this is all over Ohio as well. Ohio's like the fourth highest, I think, according to BFRO, as far as Bigfoot sightings.
And then Pennsylvania is right up there. That whole region is littered with Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, it's all over the place. So I think that just there's enough people. Of course, getting people to come forward too is a whole other thing as well. But for those that are willing to come forward and explain it and be forthcoming about their experiences, I think that helps add to the area in general, and other locals coming forward. Just a few years ago, well, at this point it may not be a few years ago because time is weird after COVID, but it was
I agree.
It was a little while ago that there were sightings at the local golf course here in Carrollton, and multiple people had seen it. It started, if I'm remembering correctly, it started with one of the guys that lived nearby that would walk the golf course regularly in the morning had seen what he called I think he said it was a gray Sasquatch, and had said something to the people who own the golf course. And they're like, oh, interesting, okay. And
what do you do with that?
Yeah, what do you do with that? But then they also saw it later. And it was the same gray color, so they're thinking it was the same one. But then, I mean, multiple people had seen it on the golf course part, like walking across the golf course, and which is right on the edge of town, so there's plenty of wooded area. It's not like it was right in the center of town. But not that town is very big, but so there were multiple people that saw that gray Sasquatch at the edge of town, and when they come out and say it, then it was shortly after that a student at the high school would come forward to my husband, because he's a high school teacher, and one of his students had talked to, I don't know if he talked to him or with a coworker, but either way, she had said that she and her father were on their way down Route 9, and one ran across the road.
They love doing that.
Yeah, just ran across the road, was across the road within like 2 steps or something. It was quite, it shook them up. And her dad, the last I heard, her dad was unwilling to speak of it after it happened. Just like, no, we're not going to talk about this.
Yeah.
But she at least had told a couple of her teachers and friends. And a lot of the stories around here, I mean, the BFRO is an invaluable resource to get an idea of what's going on. But a lot of the stories that I've heard in the area, people haven't come forward and talked to the BFRO about it. And I don't know why that is, if they just don't want their name attached to it, even though you can report anonymously from what I understand. But maybe they just don't want more people to think poorly of them, or maybe they haven't reconciled it themselves either.
Right.
So, because I don't know how you see something like that and then you don't second guess what you saw, but
of course, for real. And also, the thing is, like, I think a lot of people don't know that there's a place to, unless you're into this stuff,
true.
like we are, they may not know to report it. And I feel like that's the same thing with like MUFON and UFOs. It's like, we might be getting less, maybe 1% of the actual, because I always think, gosh, if I had like a dramatic UFO sighting or Bigfoot sighting, like, I'm not sure I would take the time to go report it. Maybe like at some point down the road, but that wouldn't be my first instinct after it happened. It's like, I got to report this. I mean, I think that my first instinct would be like, I need to grapple with what just happened. I saw something
exactly.
that's not supposed to be there. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that that also is why, like, people always ask all the time, why aren't people taking photos or video or whatever? But I mean, you got to think about what your normal response is going to be in a situation where you see something that should not exist in front
that's
of your
right.
face. Your first response, first of all, your brain has to catch up to what it's seeing before
Yes.
you can get to the point of, ooh, pull my phone out, get a picture,
That
get a video or whatever.
That's exactly right. Like, I mean, when my cats do something funny, like a lot of times I'll try to get a video, but it won't be like until a minute into them doing something funny. It's not my first instinct to
Right.
document everything. It's
Yeah.
usually to
Right.
take in the experience, try to understand the experience. Then maybe sixth or seventh on the list would be to try to document it. But like, if I'm
Yeah.
seeing a mothership UFO or a Bigfoot, I'm going to try to enjoy it, not like worry about proving it to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know,
And
oh, please,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, you please, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say that comes down to some people too who have like uh recurrent sightings. Like
Hmm.
maybe they have Sasquatch on their property or whatever. I've talked with people that have had recurrent sightings and they don't want to have it reported necessarily because they don't want people to come around. They don't want it to be interrupted. They're like, no, I'm fine with
Totally.
what's happening here.
Yeah.
Please do not disturb them.
Right. This is interesting. And also, like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, who would want a bunch of, like, yahoos trampling around on there? And that would happen. Like,
Hmm.
I think if you announce a place where a Bigfoot was seen and give the exact address or coordinates, I mean, I know a
Yeah.
dude like me is probably going to be curious,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want to keep me off your property, folks. Just kidding.
Yeah. Just don't
Well,
tell me where.
right. Well, in terms of like, talking to locals, which I again applaud you the way you guys approach this because it does seem like it's done with a lot of tender loving care. But how do you kind of nurture the relationships and get them to trust you to go on camera and talk about these extraordinary encounters?
Well, the first thing is that I have spoken with a lot of people who will never go on camera.
Hmm.
Because the first thing I do is just ask for their story.
Yeah.
Um, uh, because some people aren't even willing to share their story. It might be like a friend of a friend told me that they had a sighting or an experience, or maybe they alluded to it on a Facebook post or something. And so then I
Hmm.
just ask them out of curiosity, and they're not necessarily willing to come forward. But, it starts with just asking them, what's your story? Are you willing to
Right.
share that with me? And then ask some questions and, actually, I mean, for goodness sakes, don't be rude about it and don't laugh
Right.
at them. Don't second guess them or anything like that. Just be a place where they can talk. Cause a lot of times that's just cathartic for people to get
Yeah.
this story out there in general, even if it isn't, I'm not talking about in a documentary sense or anything, just talking to another human that doesn't judge them.
Hmm.
So talking with them and, there's been people like Martin Groves, for instance, who everybody talks about him now in the Dogman circles because he came out about his story. Um, he's a retired police officer, but when I found him on Facebook, it had been a situation where he was alluding to having similar experiences. When people would post their things, he would just words of support or whatever that let you
Right.
know he knows more than just the average Joe here when
Uh-huh.
it comes to this stuff. And so I reached out to him and I said, I'm just curious, have you had an experience? And he said, yes. And he was hesitant to tell me, but then he did. And we talked a little more. And then I told him, I said, well, I'm a researcher for a documentary film company. I'm actually looking for people that would be willing to come forward on camera. And he was like, well, I'm a retired police officer. I'm not sure that I'm willing to do that because I don't want, a reputation type situation here. I
Yeah.
don't want my reputation ruined. And
Hmm.
I said, well, that's fine. Obviously no pressure. If you don't want to come
Yeah.
forward, it's not my story to tell.
Totally.
That's totally fine. And then we just kept in touch. And then a month or so later, he's like, I've thought about it and I think it's time. Um, and then he came forward and now he has since written 3 books and people come to him constantly who have had experiences because he's one of the kindest people you could meet and it's very easy to talk to him. And so now he gets to be a source of catharsis for other people as well.
That's great.
So yeah,
That's
but
great. That's great.
patience, it's all down to patience, really.
Right. Right. And not pushing people because yeah, I mean it's That's just like a, and I mean, I will also give another comment, just saying like there is never like an agenda in your films, which I feel like some films I do notice that, and it kind of
Mhm.
bothers me where they're like they have a hypothesis at the beginning and they're trying to make everyone's testimonies fit the hypothesis
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
asking a certain type of question. There is none of that in any one of your y'all's films, and I first off, I think that's just how documentaries should be done.
Mhm.
It's capturing what really is going on. But I do want to ask you this: like, have you noticed? Because you've now been to I don't know how many small towns, probably so many, investigating and researching these encounters. And have you noticed that these small towns that have had these, a preponderance of these encounters, is there an effect? Like, even if it's like a light effect on the town. Like, have you noticed anything in terms of like the culture of the towns being sort of like influenced by these high strange events?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you bring that up is something like Point Pleasant that is fully in like embraced the
Right.
story, the folklore behind it, and now they have the Mothman Festival. They've got the Mothman Museum, of course, and then plenty of Mothman themed things that you can find around town. They've got a statue and all of that, and they've embraced it. And what that has done is allowed it to become an economic boon for the
Mm-hmm.
town. And I think that you see that in certain, I mean, even like you said, um, taking your nieces and nephews to Kecksburg. They've got the
Yeah.
acorn there. They haven't forgotten. And
Yes.
they have their festival every year as well. And I think that the small towns that are willing to embrace these stories can capitalize on them financially for one, which any small business should be up for if they're,
Yeah.
they should
I
be
love it. I
wanting.
think it's beautiful.
Yeah, and then it brings tourism into the area in a lot of these small towns, and in a place that otherwise people wouldn't be venturing to.
Hmm.
And But then you do find some towns like uh, the Missouri Monster when we did Momo, Louisiana, Missouri. At least at the time, I think things are slightly changing for them. But at the time that Seth went there to film Momo, he was basically told, "You might as well leave because we don't talk about that here." Um,
Oh,
and
okay.
so, yeah, so they were not, but at one point, shortly after the Momo sightings, they had like Momo days, and which were shopping days and stuff like that. And um, the local restaurants would have Momo themed food, and they really were into it for a short amount of time, and then it stopped. And now they don't really like to talk about it so much, although the local tourism board is trying to revive it now. And I think, if nothing else, any small town that can see something like what Point Pleasant has done should follow in those steps, because people
I
love
think
these
so.
festivals.
Yeah.
Um,
They do, and they're and beyond like the financial gain. I do think it's because I these are my favorite types of things. I don't love the big conferences as much, but I
mhm,
love going to a small conference in Iowa or Nebraska around the Midwest. One, I think it's a beautiful thing to kind of bring the community together and
yeah.
to show outsiders like, hey, this is what we have going on here. And
Mhm.
I always notice like a big sense of pride with the locals when I've gone to like, the Van Meter Visitor Festival, for instance. Like, the kids get involved, the marching band comes out and they're really proud that they have this kind of tourist attraction. And I think it's
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful. Usually I find these festivals to be super positive and like uplifting, you know?
Yeah.
And like you said,
Yeah.
like a lot of these people, like I'm a big fan of going out into rural America. I just think it's beautiful. And I think like these festivals provide, maybe some of us city folk to get out there and go explore some of this rural stuff. And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And coming from a rural area, I don't really get to the big cities much.
Uh-huh.
But even going to some of these places and seeing, you get sometimes, as far as the community aspect, sometimes these festivals are literally the only times you see some of the best people you've ever met.
Right.
Just because we all live so far apart, but we get to come together for this particular event. And so you meet some amazing people, and then back to the people that have had actual experiences, it allows them to come together with other people who have had experiences, or at the very
Yes.
least with other people who aren't going to judge them.
Yes.
So, we have countless witnesses I've talked to that your first inclination after having an experience is to speak to your family.
Mm-hmm.
And family sometimes will ridicule you because they don't believe in such things or whatever.
Right.
And so to have family and friends that won't believe you, but then you can come to this festival where multiple people there have had some similar experience and you're not alone anymore. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree, and they're celebrating it,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is wonderful too.
Yeah.
So like obviously because a lot of the subjects of y'all's documentaries, they're cases that have happened, maybe a decade or two or three, before or back in the past. But like when you were investigating, doing kind of maybe this is not the right way to phrase it, cold case research on, Minerva or the Momo, for instance, how many new details? Like I really do think going back and looking at these old cases and kind of like researching them with modern technology and newspapers.com, to me, at least in the state of Nebraska, has been incredibly valuable. But do you find that you find new details, tidbits, or maybe even patterns by doing this cold case research?
Yeah, sometimes what ends up happening is when, especially you brought up newspapers.com, you find newspaper articles that have different people mentioned that maybe for some reason their name didn't stick through to the main narrative by the end of the story.
Right.
So then you have a whole other line of people that you can go down and talk to them about their experiences and whatnot. Or what they remember from that particular case or that area or that time period, or since then, if they've known anything. Because not every researcher's name makes it into the paper, for one, or if it does make it into the paper, not all of them. Like I'm thinking, for example, Stan Gordon is a huge name out of PA.
Oh, yeah.
And Stan is all over the newspapers, but Stan wasn't the only one that gets referenced in the newspapers. He's the one that sticks and the one that they reference most often, but he isn't the sole researcher from the area. So that gives you other people to look into as well. But also it's interesting to look at, since we have something like newspapers.com, to look at the articles and how they were shaped over time, but also the ones that came out simultaneously. Sometimes there's different details. And depending on who wrote the newspaper article, you might get little bits and pieces of information that got lost over time, but were still pretty interesting in the moment and something worth looking into later, but for whatever reason just didn't stick around 30 years later, or 40 or 50 or whatever it is now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing about kind of going back with these old cases. I think now we're in this like kind of a luxurious position to be able to have the resources like on your laptop at home to do some pretty like thorough digging. I still like will go to libraries, and there's not everything's on the internet or newspapers.com, but you can really get a good like base research knowledge probably before you go and investigate a place.
Oh yeah, it gives you something. It gives you definitely a solid foundation to start. I'm thinking of like right now I've been heavy into Dogman research because the crew's getting ready to go up to Michigan to film Dawn of the Dogman. And there was a particular place up in Michigan that I had found references to a story in other articles, but the local newspaper was not on newspapers.com. It hasn't been digitized yet. So then to call the local library and say, do you guys have access to do you have the articles? And then I was able to get photocopied articles from them.
Fantastic.
But if I hadn't done the research on newspapers.com, I wouldn't have started there to begin with. That gave me the basis that I needed. So absolutely.
Have you found I have found a lot of success and gotten a lot of help from small town librarians in Nebraska.
Yeah.
They are, let's just take a moment to sing their praise, because I got to tell you, like, first off, they're so good at what they do. Yeah. But the kind of stuff they've been able to dig up for me is astounding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, absolutely.
I think for any intrepid, researcher out there, I think like make friends with the local librarians and local historians, because they have things that are not on Google, and that that it's just some very valuable stuff, I think.
Yeah, and if nothing else, they know where to direct you. Um,
Hmm.
because I've had situations as well where I call them and I'm like, this is going to sound like a ridiculous question, but because anytime you bring up Bigfoot or Dogman or anything like that, I never know who I'm talking to on the other end of the phone. So I'm like, I know that
Right.
this is probably going to sound absurd, but do you know any Dogman stories in your area or anything like that, or have any witnesses that you've spoken to? And a lot of times they love getting questions like that. They love the
Hmm.
weirder the better for them. But
Yep.
if they don't, then they're like, well, I do know someone though, like a local researcher who goes into this kind of thing. Or there was somebody in here the other day that checked out all these books. That happened once that I had called like the day after someone had come in to check out a bunch of books. And they're like, I can't give you their name, but I can reach out to them and see if they're willing to talk. And I'm like, yeah, please do. So they reached out to them. I mean, it's just, you never know who has what connection. So it's, I mean, I've called libraries, I've called police stations, I've called museums, museums that you may not think have anything to do with this kind of stuff, because you just never know
Right.
who's got a story.
Right.
And sometimes you get laughed at, sometimes you get a very curt no, but I mean, that's the worst they can do, right? Is hang up on you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very fun. I call like state parks sometimes when I get done with
Hmm.
work early. I'll, crack open a nice beverage, sit on my porch, and just start cold calling state parks.
Yeah.
And like you said, sometimes they hang up. Sometimes we're like, what? But a lot of times we're like, well, there's been reports here, but then they tell you some good stuff, and
Yeah.
it's hit and miss, but I mean, it's definitely worth it, and it's kind of fun and exciting. There's a rush and a thrill to it.
Yeah. The only time, like, I feel better about calling businesses and things like that, or the state parks wouldn't be too bad. I get extremely nervous when I have to cold call witnesses. That's when I get
Yeah.
very, very nervous.
Yeah.
And it usually goes fine. It's just that I don't know if it's partly because I'm a millennial and we're used to just texting a lot or instant messenger or what, but being on the phone with another person sometimes gets me anxious, especially if I don't know them. And because I don't know, a lot of times if I do cold call a witness, if I'm cold calling them, then I don't know if they're willing to share their story.
Right.
So, I'll get contact information and then I have to call them and say, I just have a question. Are you willing to share your story? I hear rumor you have a Bigfoot story or whatever. And
Word on the street is.
yeah, right. So and so that's friends with so and so, 3 people removed, gave me your number, and they said that you saw a Bigfoot in 1982, and are you willing to share that on camera?
Yeah.
And
We've never
sometimes,
met, by the way.
right, yeah. Sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. I had one woman, this was a long, long time ago, back when we were doing On the Trail of UFOs, night visitors. I was cold calling a bunch of people, and this one woman thought I was a telemarketer and like cussed me out and hung up on me. And I was like, wow, okay, well, all right. I'm not,
Whoops.
but yeah. Oh well. On to the next one, I guess.
Yeah. Cross that name off the list.
Yeah, right. Do not call her again.
Do not call. She was not one for the set of steak knives.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then there are other people that are just like, how did you find me?
Yeah.
Did you get my number? And I'm like,
Right.
well, the internet has everybody's contact information.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So, but it's just like it's just a digitized phone book is what it is.
It is.
Your number was in the phone book too. Just because I don't have access to the local phone book doesn't mean I don't have access to the internet to find you.
Right. So you'll oh, man, see that's a step braver than I am in terms, because I have found some local witnesses in Nebraska. I'm like, oh, I have their number, but do I want to call them about their ferry sighting on the country road from 30 years ago? It scares me. Yeah, I
You
do.
do though.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta get braver with that. I do. I really do. It's well, I want to ask you this question because I'm fascinated to hear how this has worked for you. But I feel like a lot of times, people, I think we're similar. Where I had this lifelong interest in the strange and unusual, but then when I really started kind of reading about it and, researching for myself in earnest, my ideas were just evolving like crazy and changing like daily. But have you kind of found that since you really started immersing yourself and made this a part of your, what you do for a living, have you noticed any kind of evolution in the way you see, perceive, and think about, even talk about this stuff and ask questions about it? Like, how has that
Yeah,
worked for you?
yeah, it's constantly changing because I'm trying to see which cat I can hear a cat meowing.
No,
I'm
we
trying to
love we
figure out.
love we love cat guest stars. So yeah, I got two
Well,
myself.
actually, this morning, oddly enough, my daughter went to open the front door to feed the outside cat, and a kitten come running in the house. And
my God.
it was very hungry, very thirsty, and it is now in the house. It's behind me somewhere, but we decided we're going to keep him.
No
But
way.
he just came running in first thing this morning. We thought it was our other cat that had gotten out because he looks identical to her.
Oh
But
my
no,
God.
he was just a cat that must have got dumped because he's nice and his fur is clean and everything. So I don't know.
You
People were like,
woke up
"Ooh, a
this
farm."
morning. You woke up this morning with not knowing you were going to have a kitten by midday.
Yeah, exactly. And now we have a kitten.
I have to say, this is probably the most beautiful thing I've heard in 2025. Folks, if a kitten walks in your front door, I would take that as a sign to keep that little kitten.
Right,
That
exactly.
is beautiful. Is
Yeah.
your other, and you have another cat?
I've got 3 other cats in the house, but we have the cat outside. 2 cats outside, actually. One that stays in the front and one stays in the back because they're both males, and they're like, "This is my territory. This is my territory."
Right.
But yeah, my daughter went out the front door to feed the cat out front, and in comes this little kitten. Just crying away.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have 2 indoor cats, but then I have a kind of there's like a I don't want to say feral because it's just an outdoor cat that kind of belongs to the neighborhood, but it comes by and visits me. It'll jump in my kitchen window and scratch the kitchen window when it wants a treat. Like, it's my little buddy. It's the neighborhood mascot. It's we call him Willie. It's just a great friend of mine, probably my best buddy.
Very sweet.
So sorry.
But no, that's
I
fine.
derailed you with my cat interest, but yeah,
No,
we're talking about the oh my gosh!
See him for a second.
I did. It was just a blur of fur.
Just a blur of fur. Yeah. Hopefully he'll come back. He's drinking some water right now, but I remember your question. My thoughts evolving on stuff over time, and yes, essentially, my thoughts have become more convoluted, if nothing else, because
I hear that.
When you first start in it, you're like, okay, Bigfoot, an undiscovered ape in the woods. All right, got it.
Yeah.
And then you start reading more stories. You're like, wait, there's all kinds of weird stuff attached to that. That's more than just an animal. Yeah. But the things are still so conflicting because I have friends that go out in the field regularly and they're in the undiscovered ape camp. And who am I to argue with them because they have their experiences? But then I've got witnesses that are like, yeah, but I saw it disappear right in front of my face, or it had red glowing eyes. It wasn't a reflection. It was glowing eyes. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a regular animal either.
Yeah. So, doesn't seem like it. And then there's orange orb. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things associated with Bigfoot in particular, so. Yeah.
And I don't know what to think about. I don't know what to think about any of this stuff. Honestly, I don't have any definitive. Come here. I don't have any definitive answers because it seems like right when I have a theory, then I get another witness story that throws that all off to the side.
Right. Well, it's with UFOs especially, it's like it almost seems like a lot of the stuff has this like self-negating quality. It's like, here we're gonna lead you to a point where you think it's this, and then we're gonna do a 180 and show you something totally different to confuse you even more.
Yeah, exactly. And so then that makes me wonder, like, how much. So for instance, it's crossed my mind that okay, say there is Bigfoot that's a physical. Hi,
come here, little bud. Oh my God, it's a little tabby, it looks like. Look at those pups. Folks, we are looking at one of the cutest kittens I have ever seen in my entire life. Oh, hi, new friend. This little cat was homeless hours ago, and now it's got a forever home. Yeah. And by the way, folks, if you can't see this kitten is making biscuits on Heather's arm, and it might make me start crying.
But so like Bigfoot, for example, I wondered if there isn't an animal that is like Bigfoot, but then we also don't have something else otherworldly that likes to shapeshift into said creatures.
Right.
Just because I don't know why, but are we dealing with multiple phenomena here? I don't know.
It's all on the table. No one knows, And I mean, then you look at, read Stan Gordon's book, Silent Invasion, about the 73, 74 flap of Bigfoot and UFOs in southwestern PA. Right. And you're like, well, I'm even more confused.
Exactly.
It's so interesting. Well, I've been fascinated, I guess for a while now, but especially the last 5-ish years about, for lack of a better term, kind of this idea of the magic of place. And, that there's these certain geographical regions, like the region, you live around, or, southern Wisconsin or central Kentucky, parts of Ohio, but that there's these areas that, it just seems for decades and decades are these, to use the John Keel term, window areas. And what is that something, you and Seth and the team over at Small Town Monsters have kind of discussed, or what are your thoughts on, does geography play a part? What's going on in some of these regions? I mean, not that but some of the ideas you might have about that.
I mean, I've heard ideas relating to limestone or crystal underground being part of it. I've heard not people at STM, but I've heard other people discuss ley lines, which I have not looked into very much at all. But I don't know. We've looked at these areas and we've talked about, well, there are mines in a lot of these places. Is there something about the mines that have kicked stuff up or allowed things to live there that normally wouldn't? So, I mean, but then there's also Aaron Deese has done a lot of Dogman research and noticed that a lot of the places that he's seen a preponderance of Dogman sightings, there's been a massive displacement of human populations, forced out of areas, whether that's natives or later on, whenever the early 1900s for LBL, I can't remember the exact date, 1940s, I think, but the government forced the people that were living there out so that they could close it down and make it a park. And so there was a lot of bitterness and hostility. And does the negativity in itself play a part into allowing things to be there and thrive?
Interesting. Yeah, because in the STM documentary about the Land Between the Lakes, you guys cover how people were basically booted out. Weren't they flooding the area? I can't remember exactly how.
Yeah, they flooded parts of it, but the government came in and eminent domain took the land and said we're shutting it down. And so, yes, it was land. Calm down. It was land between the rivers, and now it's land between the lakes. So they put a dam in.
Right.
What you just
interesting. Yeah, it is one of these things because, I notice all these things that I don't know if any of it is related, but I've been finding lately, in the Midwest and Nebraska in particular, that a lot of these places that have a high number of high strangeness cases throughout the last 100 years, I'll say. Also, there's weird history involved, where it's either it's true crime, really, or cults living around there. And I can't help, I'm it totally may be unrelated, but then late at night I'm but is it completely related?
Right. Is there a reason?
Is there a reason? But have you ever noticed any kind of significant weird history, or kind of true crime, I guess, a better term?
I admittedly have not looked into much true crime wise with things. That's a topic that's very difficult for me to get into, just because I emotionally get invested and then I get crushed. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm trying to think of even local areas and big old crime stories or something, and I'm not thinking Minerva, for example, and nothing's coming to mind. But in Chestnut Ridge, that's so isolated. I can't think of any. It's very possible. I just haven't looked, honestly.
Yeah. And who knows? I might be drawing patterns and parallels that are just my own personal, like, fancy or finding
Yeah.
things that I want to find in my research. But it is. I'm always trying to, at least just speculate and do thought experiments about, like, why
Mhm.
are these certain regions just like, I've been looking into southern Wisconsin a lot, and southern Wisconsin just has so much weird stuff, and I'm like, why this region? Like,
Yeah.
it's very unpopulated, and I'm just
Hmm.
and going way back, it's interesting to me, and I will probably never know why, but I feel like there's maybe something there. I don't know, Heather. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. I haven't been able to connect the dots yet, but I'm
Right.
working on it. I'll
Do
keep working
you
at it.
Yeah, well, please let me know when you figure it all out, because I think you're close. I think you're close. Have you noticed any like an abundance of things happening close to bodies of waters, rivers, lakes?
Oh, yeah. And I wonder, see, okay, yes, bodies of water, especially rivers. I mean, if you take the lake monsters out of the mix,
Mhm.
but so let's take lakes off the table, but like rivers where there's flowing water or where rivers meet, there seems to be,
Yes.
which would be like Point Pleasant area. There
Right.
seems to be a preponderance of strangeness in that area, and I don't know if it's the energy coming from the water or what, but
Yeah.
um yeah, there's usually, and then even what do they say about Bigfoot is that he follows the creeks. That's what they've said,
Uh-huh.
Sasagi Creek monster, right? So um on a physical level, an actual biological level, animals need they need food, shelter, and water.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's going to make sense that they would be around bodies of water. But um, for the weirdness, the ones that don't have corporeal aspects to them, then I don't know if it's just the energetic environment that is there. I
Right.
have no idea. But yes, I've noticed that, exactly that. And I don't know. And that goes through folklore and history for as long as you go back. You can find a concurrence of the waterways with strange phenomena or mythical beings and things like that. It
Yes.
was very important. So
Right. And I mean, especially with UFOs as well. I mean, like, UFOs are so often reported around rivers, bodies of water, over oceans, and there's just some kind of relationship with high strangeness and bodies of water. I don't know exactly what it is or what it means, but like it's a thing, I believe.
yeah, I
um,
agree.
Heather, you are a researcher, but gosh darn it, you are also a boots on the ground investigator, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think many people can truly say that. But what are some of your most intense or revelatory investigations you've participated in?
So when it comes to the cryptid side of things, I think the most intense stuff actually happened here at the farm when we were filming the Bigfoot project, because there'd already been stuff happening here at the farm anyway, which is why I contacted Seth and said, "Hey, weird stuff's going on," and he's like, "I'm bringing a camera," and that was the
I'll be
beginning
there.
of. That's right. That was the beginning of the Bigfoot project. But like on the first episode of the Bigfoot project, especially, you see there's a scene there where um Seth had brought his son Tommy down, and then I know I had my daughter Lily. I can't remember if my son was out there as well, but my youngest anyway. It was two young ones were at the cabin. My husband was at the cabin, and then Seth and I decided we're going up this trail that leads to the cabin that goes through the woods. And so we set off on the trail just to see what happens, and we end up being, at least there were at least two that you could hear running around us, right right around us, and throwing rocks at us. It was terrifying. Um it was
Wow.
cool but also terrifying. I was It was unnerving to hear them running around us, but when they threw the rock the one time and it hit near us on the ground and it was like a sizable rock, I'm like, all right, it's not as fun anymore. uh
Yeah, that would scare me to death. I mean,
yeah.
also you said that you can hear them moving around, like,
Oh yeah, like we would hear, this is why I say I think that there were two, is because um we would hear one running in front of us, and so we'd flip the light on or turn the night vision that way, which didn't do very the night vision didn't do very much for us because the foliage was so thick that you would just see the bush in front of you rather than beyond
Right.
it. But we'd turn the light on that way, and then as soon as we do that, then we'd hear one behind us. So it sounded like there were at least two, one on each side of us messing around, or one that was really fast. But then talking what happened while we were out there is that my husband had stayed back at the cabin because the kids were there, and he was sitting outside on the front porch. The kids were in the cabin, and he heard something bipedal walking up toward the cabin. So while we were having our stuff happen down the trail, something was also walking up on the cabin.
Whoa.
So that was all the most unnerving thing that probably happened at that moment in time, as far as the cryptid stuff goes. But I don't get to go, aside from like here and on occasion, like we went out and did some investigation on Chestnut Ridge. There haven't been too many times that I've had a chance to be out other than here on my own property, which has been enough. It's been enough for me with the stuff that's gone on. But like paranormal investigations, I've had some weird stuff happen there. And the weirdest thing probably happened at Mansfield Reformatory or Ohio State Reformatory. It's where they filmed Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's open for tours and investigations and such. And I was there. We were actually there filming what was a very short-lived series we had called On the Trail of Hauntings. And we had official access to the prison for the entire night until like 3 or 4 in the morning. But we were only filming until like 11 or something. And so I invited the people that I do my ghost hunting with to come. And I'm like, because the prison's going to be open, so let's just do an investigation for a few hours in the early morning hours. And what we saw, it was a place called the West Attic. And it's an interior room. There are no windows. It's just a singular door to get in, a very long room. And it is known for, if people go in and sit down, they can see balls of light will like manifest, orbs of light will manifest of various colors. And so we're like, okay, that'll be cool. That's why we were in there to begin with. Let's see this. Because aside from in the woods, I've not seen orbs of light in a building. So we sat down, and my group had actually seen it before they called me up because I was finishing up my interviews, and they were up there alone, and they came down. They're like, you're not going to believe what's up in the West Attic. I'm like, okay. So we go up there, and the balls of light start, and that's fine.
And you can see with the naked eye. Are you seeing these?
Oh yeah, seeing it with the naked eye, you could say like, okay, I see a light. Do you see a light? Yes. Which way? To my left. Okay. What color? Purple, or whatever, just to verify that we were all seeing the same thing. But then what happened was that we saw at the end of the room this, I call it like a light being, where it was it was like the reverse of a shadow figure. It was a full body, but made of light instead of shadow. You could see it. It wouldn't show up on the cameras because we tried. But you could see it with your eyes, and it would walk back and forth. It would walk closer to us, and it emanated enough light that when it would go over by the wall, you could tell it was by the wall because the wall would light up.
Really?
And it would go walk back and forth. It would get closer to us. It seemed to interact a little bit when you'd say, okay, you can come closer. It would get closer. But then when it get really close, it would drop down on all fours and start crawling. And that was not cool.
Oh my God.
That was the most unnerving thing. And the cool thing about it is that I'd had that experience, and that was, I don't even know what year that was now. I'd have to think about it. It's when we were filming On the Trail of Hauntings. But I had shared that experience on some podcasts, and a few years later, I was fortunate enough to be able to go back with a whole new group of people, and they all saw it too.
Really?
In
the same area?
Same in the West Attic. They're like, let's go to the West Attic and see if, you said that's where the light person is or whatever. Let's see if we could see it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. It's been years, but, hopefully. And then soon enough, it shows up and starts walking toward us. And the one woman's like, turn the lights on, turn it on. I don't want to see it. Turn the light on. But it would show up, and it had showed up for us the first night that I saw it, we had that experience, and we would leave and go investigate other areas of the prison and come back, and it would show up again. So it showed up for us multiple times that night, but then to have it come again years later. So I spoke with the local paranormal investigator there, and I asked him how many people have seen, are there other people that have seen this? And he said, yeah, people are calling it the Glimmer Man because it seems to
The
like
Glimmer
shimmer.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I still call it a light being because I don't know what else. But Glimmer
Right.
Man makes
Right.
sense. It makes sense for what it looks like. It does glimmer, shimmer a little bit. But yeah, that was the most unnerving thing that I've seen while investigating.
Have you, that is so. I mean, like how before you had seen this. I mean, that I
Mhm.
would classify that as a very dramatic, and
Yeah.
experience, right? Had you
Yeah.
experienced anything in the paranormal realm before that? Were you like at least were you able to like ease your way into experiences? Like,
Oh yeah, I had other experiences. I mean, shadow figures. When I was a teenager, I'm not sure exactly the age I was. I just know I was old enough to be home alone, so I was older than 12, and not old enough to have a job, or I would have been at work. So somewhere between 12 and 16, um, I was home alone and saw a full body apparition in the house. But
wow.
it didn't scare me. I see this is where I go a lot off of gut reactions with things. I saw the full body apparition, and my feeling was, oh, that's just dad for whatever reason, even though it looked nothing like dad.
Right.
And I looked and I'm like, oh, it's just dad. And I look back around, and then my brain catches up and goes, that wasn't dad. What are you? I turned back and it was
Yeah.
gone. But I wasn't afraid. And then like shadow figures, while actually investigating and stuff in all these haunted buildings, shadow figures, they're, you see them pretty frequently the first handful of times, and every once in a while it'll startle you.
Thank God.
But I'd had experiences prior to that, light being, but nothing prepared me for that
Yeah.
because I was just shaking the whole time that I was ready to get out of there, but I wanted to come back and see it again.
Mm-hmm.
I was shaking because my brain's going, this shouldn't exist. What are you seeing? This can't possibly exist. There's no other light source in here. What is that?
Right.
I don't know. And because in folklore, like with shadow figures and stuff, I had seen plenty of shadow figures, so I was used to it, I guess. But you don't see
Uh-huh.
the light figures. And I can't think in folklore any stories of light beings. I mean, orbs
Yeah.
of light and stuff like Will o' the Wisp, but not like a full being. And
Right.
so my brain was going, what is this? I have no precedent for this in my brain. um,
Right.
so that was not that I wasn't already open-minded to stuff, but that was probably the beginning of me going, okay, if that exists, then what else exists?
Right.
And yeah, because I mean, like I said, I wasn't closed-minded to this before, but that was one of those moments of your brain going, okay, one more tick closer to the other side of anything is possible.
Yeah, that's a pretty big jump too.
Yeah.
I mean, like shadow figures. I've never seen one like exactly like. I mean, I've seen things that are maybe dark and shadowy, but like
Yeah.
the Glimmer Man or the Light Being. That's dramatic.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
did that? I mean, like, and I'm not trying to get personal, but like, did that change you? Like, I mean, that's like a confirmational experience. Where you're like, I'm looking at something that absolutely should not be there by all, rhyme and
Yeah.
reason. I
Right.
mean, like, how does that affect you? Like,
That what well, it scared me in the moment. I mean, I remember I was holding on to my friend's arm, and he was like, my arm's going numb, you're gonna have to let go. But I'm like, no,
you're
no,
cutting off
I
my
can't.
circulation.
Right, exactly. But no, it was, and it wasn't even in the moments that it had, like, scared in the moments that it happened, brain not processing stuff. It's not until a day or two or three or four later that you're able to sit down and really think about it and go, you know what? Um, maybe I shouldn't second guess not that I second guess the other side, but maybe I shouldn't second guess other elements of the other side. Like,
Hmm.
everybody has their thoughts and what happens after you die, but maybe I should be more open-minded about everybody's input. Like maybe
Right.
everybody's got a piece to this. Um, and nobody really knows the full answer. And um, yeah, like I said, it's the thought of, okay, if this exists, then what doesn't exist? Like, how can I
Mhm.
definitively say, well, no, you didn't see a dog man. How
Right.
dare you say it's such an absurd thing? Like,
Right.
I mean, I saw a glowing figure in the dark, like what, and it was
Yes.
walking, and then it crawled at me. So, and I
Yes.
know I saw it, and I wasn't the only one. So
Right.
I can't even doubt what I saw because I had verification over multiple years from other people. So, like, it's there. What is it? I don't
Right.
know. But I'm not going to tell somebody that had an experience, a weird experience, like, no, that can't be. You're making it up. No.
Isn't it kind of odd to you? Like, when I think about, because there are these places where people will have these, multiple different people will have the same sort of experience at a certain location, and like, I guess, like, if you were an exploratory, like a curious scientist, wouldn't you say, like, hey, this seems like nothing's a sure thing, but we have these reports of a light being, like, it seems crazy that that's not worthy of study. Like,
Yeah.
to me, like, if I was even like a research grad student or something, I'd be like, hey, maybe we should go try to document some of this stuff, because if this stuff is real, what does it say about science and using the scientific method? And like, wouldn't this be like a dramatic, huge, like, discovery for science? Like,
Yeah.
like, it boggles my mind sometimes, like,
Hmm. Yeah. I think it comes down to, with a lot of this, is that even if scientists have an interest in this kind of thing, it comes down to what will the university be willing to fund as
yeah,
far as them to
great.
do their
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason that it doesn't happen, but also the reason that there probably aren't more scientists coming forward and saying, "Oh yeah, let's study this," because they don't want to lose their funding,
Right. No,
or
I
lose
think
their
you're exactly right.
standing. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It would be nice if somebody that had a lot of money to put into
Yeah.
this, then had an interest in it, would do so, and then we could have probably some more answers. Because until then, it's a lot of it based on hearsay or just people's experiences, and that's not enough to prove anything
Hmm.
scientifically, of course. And um, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever. Of course, lately somebody had mentioned, they said something about magic is nothing more than science that hasn't been proven yet. And
Uh-huh.
I thought about that. I'm like, that in a lot of ways is true. A lot of things that we
Mhm.
thought were magic or witchcraft way back when was just, okay, knowing what plants would actually work to cure an
Yeah.
illness or whatever. It wasn't anything magic. It just seemed like it at the time. We just didn't understand it. So I wonder how much of that we've yet to figure out.
Right. Right. Ah, man, it's so interesting. So have I know there's kind of that new, it's sort of a new school term, and I guess, for lack of a better phrase, I can't come up with a better way to put it, but, like, have you ever experienced any kind of, like, for some reason I'm kind of dreading even saying this, but, like, hitchhiker effect, or, like, some kind of paranormal residue after you leave a location, like, for instance, from the Glimmer Man, like, have you experienced any other kind of, like, weird stuff in the prior days or weeks? Or the Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing that I can think of that really, aside from the normal, like they call it a paranormal hangover or whatever, but that's only because you're up all night long and you mess up
Right,
your circadian rhythm, and then you got to sleep for
right.
like 2 days to get back.
Yeah.
But other than that, the weirdest thing that happened was the first time that I had gone to a place called Fairfield Infirmary, Fairfield County Infirmary, which is in Ohio, south of Columbus somewhere, I think. Anyway, it's like 3 hours away from me. That's all I know. It was a long drive. And the stunning thing about it is that every floor has this red carpet. That's what stuck with me while I was there. Is like, why did they choose this red carpet for everything? But um it's like white walls or yellow walls, I can't remember, but white carpet. Anyway, so we had some experiences there. Nothing that really sticks with me, but I know we had activity. And then I drove home, and the 3 hours home, which was horrible and really stupid, but I did it. And it was like daylight by the time I got home, and I went to bed. I was woken up later in the morning by my son freaking out. I hadn't been asleep very long at all, freaking out because he had a nightmare. And he's like, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I had a nightmare. I'm like, okay, what was your nightmare? Because I always give the kids the option to talk, do you want to talk about it? If you don't want to, that's fine. But if you want to talk about it, maybe you'll feel better. So I was like, do you want to talk about it? He's like, yeah, I was in this big building and there was red carpet everywhere. And there was this really tall, slender figure with a big smile chasing me through the hallways. But he was like, there was red carpet. It was red carpet. And that's what stuck with him. And I was angry at that point. Not at him, but I was really angry. And I was like, okay, buddy, it was just a dream. You've never been to a place like that, whatever. Because I hadn't said anything. I hadn't sent him pictures or anything. He had seen nothing about that place. And I had just come home and gone to bed. So I hadn't even had a chance to talk to the family about anything that had happened. So when he leaves the room, then out loud, I was like, you don't mess with my kid. Just for anything that might be listening, do not mess with my kid. Torture me all you want. Right. You're not messing with my kid. And then he didn't have a nightmare after that, but that was probably the closest thing I thought that something must have followed me home and just decided, oh, there's a kid, let's mess with the kid. Because I have no idea why else he would have a dream the night that I get back from a huge building with red carpet. Right. He would have a dream being chased down these halls with red carpet by some being with a big smile.
Jeez.
Other than that, though, nothing that has like hung on. I've had weird experiences while in the investigation, but nothing that has like followed me home. Good. That I've been aware of. Yeah. So
good.
Unless it's
my
still
wife
here.
My wife like makes me sage myself and do all kinds of things when I go where she's like, you can go check this stuff out, but if you bring something home, it's over.
Yeah.
She's like, it doesn't cross the front door, Steve. I'm like, fair enough. But all jokes aside, like, do you kind of like, I don't know, like, do you have like some sort of like safety measures you take or like protection measures like when you're done with an investigation?
So a lot of the stuff that I do is just intent more than anything else. I have done the saging thing if somebody else has sage and they're like, do you want sage? Sure, yeah. I don't bring sage. Right. I don't do anything ahead of time because for some reason I am nervous that if I do too much ahead of time, then nothing will happen. Because you're like putting up this barrier from the beginning.
Right. That makes sense.
So I don't do anything ahead of time, but after time, it's more intention. Like, okay, you can stay here. You can't come with me. Once I cross this threshold, you stay. Right. Kind of thing. Whether I say that out loud or in my head, but the intention's there. So that's what I do. But so far that's been fine. I don't think I've been to active places, but I don't believe that I've been anywhere that has anything inherently evil in it. So Who knows if that would do me any good if I were at a place where there was pure evil. But
right.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out someday.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't. It doesn't seem like you're going to be stopping going to weird places anytime soon.
No. Nope. Absolutely not.
Have you found yourself like and I don't really know what your bravery level was before you got into investigate, but are you finding yourself like getting more and more brave? 'Cause, I mean, like, look, I've watched the documentaries. You're out in the forest at night. I mean, like, you're doing stuff where I'm like, I say I would be not scared, but like, I know I would be. Like, I mean, you do some not crazy stuff, but like just some like scary stuff, objectively scary.
So I think that it has to do with the situation in general, because like it's a case by case basis on how I'm feeling. Because also, say for example, something happening here at the farm. If something's going to come right up to the house, I'm going to have a problem with that. That's going to make me more nervous. Right. It's going to make me more nervous to go outside or do anything like that because it's come too close to home. Where if I'm out in the woods somewhere else, that's not home. So, hey, let's see what we can find. And the same with the paranormal stuff. Although the last time I did just do a paranormal investigation, last week I went to a couple different places actually, and there was a moment that they were like, "Okay, Heather, you do the Estes method," and I'm like, "Okay," and they're like, "You go sit over there in the other room," and I was like, "No, nope, no, no, I will not. I can't
This
hear
room
you."
seems fine.
Yeah, I was like, "I'll tell you what, I'll sit on the farthest corner of this room with
Yeah.
headphones on," but they're like, "There's a chair down that hallway," and I'm like, and I understand that, but I'm not doing it
I'm
because
good.
I'm sitting here with, I mean, it would be bad enough if I had all my senses about me, but when you're down with and have the headphones on, your eyes
Yeah.
closed or a blindfold, I'm like, the next thing I know, something's going to grab me or something, and I am not wanting that. So how about I
Yeah.
just stay here where if something grabs me, at least you guys are 30 feet away. Like,
Right. Yeah. I'm with you on that. No other room for Estes method. I mean, that's for somebody else
yeah,
to do. Hard
right.
pass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know,
So,
when you've been out, I mean, because like, you know, again, I will say I love so another thing I love about y'all's films is that it is there's this sense of like positive disassociation from everyday humdrum life, city life, the horrors of the world news, whatever you want to call it. But like, I think like one thing I love is you guys are always out in nature, and it's these
mhm.
small towns, and there's this really like beautiful like. You know, I feel like the geography is important for Seth as a director and for you all to tell the story. And I feel like the geography and the location becomes a big part of the story. Is that something that's intended, or has that just been like this kind of like happy accident result?
I think it's a mix of both because, you know, it's always important to get a familiarity with the area and to make it so that the audience can have a familiarity with the area. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
just a bunch of stories that they're hearing. There's some
Right.
sort of context for it. So it's always, if we have the time and we can make it work, it's always better to have, like, if somebody's willing to take us to their spot of the encounter to
Right.
fully immerse us in it. A lot of times our schedule does not allow for that. So then we have to do the interview, but then we go out and get B-roll or whatever of the scenery or try to get close to it or whatnot. But yeah, I think that sometimes we are even blown away by how beautiful the scenery is. And especially if you're able to get these really sprawling landscapes. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking of I'll never forget Alaska. There was nothing you could do to top Alaska in my mind. But there was nowhere to go that it wasn't a really good view. Even just driving down the highway, there's mountains. It just didn't even look real. It looked like a backdrop.
Right.
Um, but to have that on there and then try to convey that to the audience through film is something that we absolutely do try to do. I think that sometimes, like I said, though, it turns out to be even more breathtaking than we anticipated.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful result because like I do feel like I'm a big like in terms of like literature or film, cinema, whatever. Like I think world building is like the thing I
Yeah.
always look for first.
Yeah.
And somehow, like, and I don't feel this way about that many documentaries or documentary series. Like, you guys do a very good job of world building in the first 10 minutes. And I
Hmm.
feel like, oh, okay, I get this geography. I get a sense of the magic of place. And to me, that is an aspect I just love. And and I think it's something that you guys put a lot of thought into doing,
Yeah.
and it really does put the viewer in the forest with you guys, and
Hmm.
that is like, I don't know how you would teach somebody as a documentarian to do that, but somehow it magically really works for
Yeah.
everything you guys do. And that just must, it's like the to me it's like a common thing when I go to watch a new STM film or video series on YouTube. I'm like, I know I'm going to get a good sense of this place.
Hmm.
And that is really a wonderful result because
Yeah.
aside from learning about the high strangers, I'm also learning about an area. So it's like double
Yeah.
education. And plus the beauty makes me feel very good. Like it makes me
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. All of that, I would have to say is Seth's view of things, like Seth doing that, because from the beginning, Small Town Monsters has been his. And so
mhm.
everybody else there's only a couple of us that have been, and I'm not one of them, a couple of us that have been with him since the beginning. And the rest of us that have come in to help, when we've come in, it's been more like, okay, we know what STM is because Seth has already done a really good job of establishing that. Now, how do we add to that?
Right.
And so he had already created this tone for what STM is. And then the rest of us are like, I like that. I want to do that too. And then we join it. Like Aaron and I are like, okay, we know the theme. Like we get it. Let's add more to it. Let's see what we can do to add to it. But it wouldn't be what it is if it weren't without Seth's vision. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he set up some great parameters for you all to work with, and it's just one of the many reasons why these films are successful. I just have like two more questions. I'll let you go. Sorry, I have so much of your time. Fine. But like when you've been out in the forest at night or during the day for that matter, have you ever, aside from what you would think is Bigfoot activity or what would seem to be Bigfoot activity, have you ever experienced anything else that's kind of strange and unusual in a forest?
I mean, the next thing aside from Bigfoot activity that I've seen are like the strange lights in the woods. You've seen those.
You've seen those then?
Yeah, we actually got them on camera when we did Sasquatch on Earth, The Ridge. And I don't remember. I don't remember which episode it was now, but
it's down the dirt road, right? The lights. That is really that. By the way, folks, it's a great documentary, but that is a very crazy part.
Yeah, that was wild.
What was that?
Everybody was seeing different ones. Like we were at separate areas, and you would see what almost looked like a headlamp on somebody, but we'd radio down. Are you walking toward us? Do you have your headlamp on? No, but I see it too. So there was that. But the one that really got me, which at this point I was behind the camera a lot, so I couldn't like run after the lights or anything, even though I might have wanted to. But we were filming on our end of the road, and these two lights manifested in the road. They were probably it was like a car width apart. And what it looked like as if a car was parked sideways and they had the headlights and the taillights were on, because one was red, one was white. And they were both about the size of a basketball. They were very large. And they were bright enough that the puddle on the ground was reflecting the light, because that's how much light they were emanating. And the one guy that we were with started to walk toward them to see what he could see, I guess. And I had to stay back because I had to be behind the cameras. So I didn't see this. But what he said is as he got closer, they had started to come together. And then right when he started to reach for it, they just disappeared. I couldn't see that from the angle that I was at by the time he had moved up there, but I did see them manifest and reflect the lights or reflect the puddle on the road. And I don't know what that was. I still don't know. But that was cool. That wasn't frightening at all. There was no scary moment to that. That was just pure excitement of, oh my gosh, I'm seeing these things that I've heard about. But other than that, I can't think of anything really in the woods that wouldn't be more Bigfoot type activity that I've experienced. Even when we were at LBL, and we went out filming at night with Martin Groves and Daryl Denton, there was a moment where we like turned all the lights off and just listened and saw how dark it was and how desolate it was. And there had nothing really happened. I mean, you were hearing some things here and there moving, but it wasn't like scary. Right. Not really, but also it's hard to be scared when you're with a whole group of people in the woods.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. My biggest fear anytime that we go out in the woods or anytime I go out in the woods is that I'm going to run into another person. That's my biggest fear.
Me too. There's nothing scarier than people, right?
Right, exactly. So,
especially at a night in a rural area, you're like, oh boy.
Yeah, I know why I'm here, but why are you here? You know, like
exactly right. That's honestly what I don't have like really any buddies who are into this stuff. So I do go out and look at this stuff, but right when the sun's going down, I'm like, I'm out of there, because like it's not the phenomenon per se that is keeping me, but like it's honestly just people I fear.
Yeah.
For a good reason. We don't have a great history.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Heather, one more question, and that is, so a lot of my friends who listen to this show, that my the listeners, a lot of them really are into research, and I think a lot of people are researching for themselves now.
Mhm.
As a person who's an excellent researcher, has been doing it for a while, what advice would you give to budding researchers in the world of Forteana?
Okay. One is don't give up. Because even if it seems like it is a cold case, so to speak, or there's very little to it, just you find like one-off article, there's always something else to uncover. So just keep
Mm-hmm.
digging. Do not
Mm-hmm.
stop digging. Don't be afraid to reach out to other people and other researchers, because a lot of times other researchers may have already gone down the same path that you're on, and they may
Yeah.
have done a lot of the work that you're getting ready to do. So why redo it? You can get where they got to and then start from there.
Yeah.
I don't think hoarding your research is a good thing either, because
Bingo.
and some people do that, but it doesn't help us get anywhere in the end. It doesn't help us figure out anything to
Amen.
keep your research to yourself. So don't be that kind of researcher. But yeah, just be willing to talk to people, and if your research is going to involve witnesses, don't be judgmental, be open-minded. You may get, I'm not saying that I haven't come across people that I'm like, wow, that can't, there's no way. But
Right.
that's very rare. So give people the benefit of the doubt.
That's great advice. And if you have the means and you're able, and the thing is, like, I always kind of not preach, but I always push like people. It's like there are all these wonderful places, like especially where you live. There's a lot to go check out. But
Mhm.
I have kind of the opinion that, like, if you look hard enough, every place is weird. So like
Oh yeah.
you don't have to break the bank or like buy plane
Mhm.
tickets or like save up for a year. Like you can go on a Saturday morning and go, because there is weird stuff that happens with in driving distance from everyone.
Yeah.
But like get out there if you're able to, or you have the desire. Like I think there's something to be said to going to these places and feeling it, a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think if wherever you're living, if you start researching the area that you're living first, then you're starting to create roots for yourself as well. And
Bingo.
even more beneficial if this is somewhere where your family has lived before, it's a familial tie, then you can eventually tie this into genealogy somehow, because maybe your grandmother had a similar story, or maybe
Yes.
she heard something like that. Like, you're keeping history alive in that way. So I think that that's highly important. And don't discredit, which we mentioned this earlier, but do not discredit the amount of help that you can get from the library, whether that's the librarians themselves, or a lot of libraries have free access to, well, they pay for it, but they let you have free access to something like newspapers.com or
Absolutely.
ancestry.com or various databases. And you can log in on their computers and access all of that stuff from there. So you don't have to pay for it yourself either.
Yeah.
So
And it's exciting. Like for me, research is a rush. Like when I find even the smallest little new detail, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I start freaking out.
exactly.
And it really is like, I don't know, maybe it's a sign I'm just getting older now, but like that is where the fun is for me these days.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I love it so much. It's and I
Mhm.
really just research like my surrounding states for the most part. I mean, I look into everything, but I love that. I love those are some great pieces of advice. And I also what you said, like start with your local area and get some roots. And I think
Yeah.
it's also just accessible. It's cost effective, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Heather Moser, you are a fantastic soul. I'm so again, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but like I just love the work you do. You're such
Thank you.
an asset to the small town monsters. I remember when you first kind of started coming, I'm like, oh, she's good. I like it. She's got a good point of view, and you're just good on camera. And like that means something too. You can't teach that, kid.
Uh,
But where can my lovely listeners find more of your work? And if you have anything coming up, we'd love to hear about it.
Okay, so obviously anything Small Town Monsters does, you can follow, and I'll probably have some part in it in some manner. So smalltownmonsters.com. You can email me, Heather at smalltownmonsters.com, if you want to. You can check out my podcast, The Lore You Know, or Monsteropolis. I'm a co-host with Seth and Mark. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is paganhistorian. I did
Perfect.
just get in the most recent volume of The Feminine Macabre, which is volume 7. And in it, there's an article about a fellow researcher who is often forgotten. Joan Jeffers was her name. She was a researcher in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that does not get talked about nearly enough. So a small piece to keep her memory going. And I will be at a couple different conferences that I cannot remember the name of right now because you put me on the spot. But I will be around. So I'll put all that on my Instagram and stuff. You'll see it over time.
Good deal. Good deal. And that, folks, you are going to find all that information in the show notes. Heather, thank you so much for giving me your time. You are a wonderfully fascinating person, and you are doing the good work. On behalf of all the listeners of High Streams, we thank you for your efforts because they do mean a lot. I mean, like, when you're into this stuff, it's not always easy to find high quality stuff. And y'all have just been consistently putting it out there. And it really is a big contribution. I love this stuff so much. So it's like anytime someone makes a meaningful contribution, I'm really grateful. So I truly am very grateful for the work you all have been doing. Please keep it up. We need you out there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time and thanks for coming on and chat with me. And folks, thanks for listening to another episode of Hi Strangeness. Enjoy your dinners tonight. Peace. Stop.